Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I thought we could do just a quick intro to knitting video. So if you're here, you probably want to learn how to knit. And so for that, you're going to need at the most, like the most basic level, two things. You're going to need knitting needles. These ones are circulars. So that just means that there's this cord connected. It's flexible. They come in both fixed and interchangeables, but this is just a basic pair. You can also get the straight ones. That is entirely up to you. These ones that I have are circulars. They're metal and they are a 10 millimeter. Oh no, sorry. They are a 6 millimeter. They're a US 10. And then you're also going to need yarn. Your choice of yarn, whatever you want, whatever you've got. There are lots of places to get this. This is just a easy brand, easy acrylic. So that's what you need, the most basic. There are lots of little other things you can use, little trinkets, other things. I don't have any of them with me right now, but you can get more interesting, different things when you get more into it. But this is what you need at the most basic level. This is what you should start with. And so to start, I'm going to teach you the long tail cast on. This is the one I started with when I learned how to knit. It is what I consider easy. And I say that because not every cast on method will work for every person. And so you might have to play around and watch a couple other videos to really see if there's a method that works better for you. This one, the long tail method, means you have to take this bit, so you see how there's an end here. We're going to take as much yarn as we think we need to cast on. So I'm going to start with trying to cast on 20 stitches. So I'm going to take out enough yarn, I think, to make 20 stitches. And this is a lot of guesswork. There are probably ways to do it, and once you get the hang of it, and once you've done this a little bit more, you'll probably figure out, you'll know more. But we're going to go with about this much yarn. So the first thing you do is make a slip knot. Once you've made your slip knot, you pick up your knitting needle, put your slip knot on your needle, you tighten it. Make sure that it is loose enough. You see how there's a little bit of room there to slide it around. Make sure that there's some room, just because otherwise it makes it too hard to move the knitting back and forth, and you want just a little bit of loose tension. So the next step is, now that you've got it on, you hold this yarn, your working yarn, which is the yarn connected to the ball. You're going to hold that in your hand like this. Then you're going to take your tail, this yarn, and we're going to wrap around our thumb, and then we're going to take this finger right here, insert it like this, so that it's like this on your hand. Insert your hook, your needle, yarn over, pull through, and then tighten up so that it's just a little tighter. And then again, we're going to wrap it around. So you see how it's in front here. Take this finger over this one, under the rest of the tail, slip it through, and then under again, yarn over. All right, so one more time. So now you see how we've got 4 stitches on, and we're just going to keep going like that until we have the desired amount of stitches. And you'll want to, when you're pulling this yarn out, you'll want to leave enough room, enough of a tail left, so that when you're finished, you can weave in your ends. That is, let me pull out some more yarn there. That is the best way to do it, just because then, you have yarn to secure it. If you're sewing it up and you want to knit something flat and sew it up, you're going to want to be able to use your tail. So we're going to say, we'll do 2 more. Okay, and again, one more time. You wrap it around, finger under, needle along, and then just like that. All right, so this tail is probably a little longer than I might necessarily need, but that is not a bad thing. So next we're going to flip our needles over so that our stitches are in our left hand and the needle without any stitches and in the right. And so to do the next thing you're going to want to do, well, I guess The most basic stitch you can learn is called the knit stitch. So to do that, you're going to take your working yarn, make sure it's your working yarn, the one, you know, connected to your ball. And so the way I do that is sometimes I'll try and separate them out, or I'll hold my tail with me. Usually if I'm knitting, I don't hold my tail. I just try and keep it a little separate from my working yarn. And so to do a knit stitch, you take this, you want to put it in front and under, wrap it around, pull it through, and then slide it off. Again, that is, so your yarn is behind you. Well, not behind, it's in front of you, behind your work, in, around, back and front, and over. And you're just going to continue doing that. See, so you see how we go in, wrap around, and then you'll bring it back to the front. And that helps you anchor the new stitch onto your next needle, this kind of motion. And doing a looser tension, especially when you're getting started, is kind of difficult. So if you find that you're knitting too tight, don't be too worried. Just try and give yourself a little bit more leeway. And I'll show you what to do if you get to the end of the row and you want to think that might help loosen it up. So now that you've finished, you can take it, put down that needle, and you just slide it. And if you can slide them, you've done it fine. If not, when we get to the next row, try adding just a little bit more of a stitch. So we're doing another knit row. And so if you're having some tension problems, it might be easier to try not holding this yarn if you're too tight. Don't hold this yarn. Don't pull it. Don't do too much extra work. Now, if your stitches ends up like this, but the other stitches aren't, you're going to want to pull that just a little bit tighter if you're too loose. So play around with a little bit of how hard you tug, or, you know, just how you're doing it. And this style of knitting that I do is called the English method, or throwing, because you're throwing the yarn over the needle. There are other methods you can do. There's a continental where you hold the yarn in this hand. I don't know how to do that one, so I'm just going to show you this. This one does take a little bit more arm muscle, so it is a little harder on you long term if you're going to knit for hours straight. But I think you should be doing some stretches or some warm-ups if you're going to. And you'll see that our tail is over here, but because we've done 2 rows, we can't, it doesn't get as much in our way. And so this stitch that we're doing right now, when you knit every row, is called a garter stitch. That one is kind of fun. It makes it like soft, but you also get little ridges every row. We're going to do one more row of knit stitches, and then I'll show you the purl stitches. All right, so now that we've done a knit stitch, I'm going to teach you how to do a purl stitch. And a purl is the kind of the same as a knit stitch. So your yarn, instead of being behind you, so instead of taking it back and putting my yarn this way. I instead am going to pull it towards me, and then my needle is going to go from the back under. Then I'm going to wrap my yarn over, take my needle back to the back, and pull the other stitch off. So you see my needle is going to go through this back of the loop so that you can see it. My yarn goes over, I pull my needle back to the back, and then I slide it off. And you see how the loops, instead of going, so if you were to knit that stitch, your needle would go like this, and your loop would go in the back of the work. Instead, let me fix this real fast. Instead, it's going to go in the front. So that's what your purl row looks like when you're looking at it from right or wrong side. You will notice when I flip it back over that there is something going on here with the front, as I'll call it. So you'll see that there's this little ridge where we did the knit stitches, but then here you see little V's. This is a different stitch called stockinette. That one makes a nice flat surface. So in order to do that one, we would alternate our knit and our purl rows. But I'm going to show you purling one more time. Oh, didn't have my yarn prepped there, so that's why I did that. So you'll see that it's a little big here. Our sides are going to be a little wonky. Nope, missed it there. Yeah. So that's what your purl row will look like on your second one. Okay, so let's do another purl row. So I pulled it a little bit tighter just because it was too big. And when your stitches get too big on the needle, they can get a little unwieldy. So sometimes it helps to tighten up the stitches on your needle before you go in, especially if they're on the ends. Oh, something fell off. All right. So that is how you do a knit and a purl. And you'll see we've got just this little bit going. So that is that. So there's lots of stitches you can make just by alternating those two. Lots of stitch patterns you can make just by alternating one of those two stitches. I recommend starting with the basic stockinette, and that will give you, so trying to do this little middle guy right here again. So you'll start with one knit row and then a purl row. So all your odd rows will be knits, and all your even rows will be purls. And try that for a little bit. Don't be worried if your sides do start to curl. That happens with all knitting, all of your stockinette knits. If that does bother you, you can try knitting the first 2 stitches of your row and the last 2 stitches of your row, and just switch in between that, and that will help keep a little bit of an edge going, but you will have this type of stitch along the edge. But yeah, so I hope that helps. I hope that kind of covers the first 2 stitches, and next week we will cover some stitch patterns you can do with these 2 stitches. Have a good week.